typically were going to be CHP or maybe a task force that had, conglomerate of guys on there. But we used to get the safety intel on that stuff. And I don't know if this stuff ever reached, to the interstates, like, where you were at in Tennessee. And I sure hope it did. But since we're so, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from the border and the cartels, we used to get the safety briefings. And I remember there was one time we got one where they said, hey, understand that some of these guys that you may pull over and stop that are carrying loads do not have criminal histories, and they're not even cartel guys, but they've been essentially pulled hostage by the cartel, because the cartel will go get these people that have clean records so they can pass the border and take their family and say, this load needs to reach this location, and if it doesn't, your family's going to die. And here's a video of what we did to this guy's family when he thought that we weren't serious. And I'll just tell you guys, gruesome, because we've seen these things. And these guys were told, and if you do stop, you better fight it out with the cops to the death if you want your family to survive. So these people are sent literally on a suicide mission. And these are the guys that you're supposed to find.
Yes. And, we were getting the same intel because I had Epic access through El Paso. I had HIDA access. I was a HIDA agent for the high intensity drug trafficking area out of Gulfport, Mississippi. So I was getting daily briefs from all around the country on what was happening. And so I worked by myself, and I basically had from the Alabama state line almost to Nashville. We had a small area in between Nashville and us, Williamson County. And we had several major corridor secondaries that were like Highway 64 that runs from Arizona to the Carolinas. And there were some times that that hair on your neck stood up and was like, it's like you like something's about to happen. And I always treated people with respect. I was never the cocky guy, because I knew it could change in an instant. That person that you're dealing with could be that nice guy and instantly, produce a gun, which I've had happen several times. I was dealing with, sometimes 3 to 4 people at a time by myself with no backup. I had a dog, but it was a narcotics dog. So it was a passive alert narcotics. So it wasn't apprehension or a bite dog. So basically it was me, my brain, and how I treated people. And I was very lucky. I had some of the assistant directors of other drug task force contacting my director saying, dude, he's getting like a lot of good stuff. He's on the HIDA report almost every day. He's working his butt off. He's getting a lot of guns. He's getting a lot of weapons. He's getting all of this stuff. If you keep him out there by himself, he's going to die. They will kill him. And that was a wake-up call. And, that's where I started realizing, having to cover 4 or 5 counties that I covered by myself doing interdiction. That's where I started making the ties to the corruption and how this person in this county is tied to this person in this county, because I'm traveling these counties daily. And I'm like, what is this dude from over here, which is 2 hours away, doing over here? Who's he going to see? And I started putting that information together. And so it was helpful. It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about human nature, how to do interviews on the side of the road, how to identify stuff, how to identify indicators. And so it was a really good, positive thing. But doing the interdiction was...
Just to make people understand that when you're saying indicators, you guys, I would imagine most of this audience has seen the movie The Matrix. And there's the way that all of us see the world. And then when Neo kind of evolves, he sees everything with codes, the numbers, everybody's green, the guys are green. Essentially, that's what Sean's describing. It's when he's talking indicators, we can all look at, a scene of a semi pulled over and be like, oh yeah, it's a semi pulled over. But what Sean's looking at is, all right, here's a semi. This plate is not going through this route. The hazard thing that he has matched up is not the route that these trucks would normally take. Or, hey, his side mirror is angled not the way he would be looking to make sure he can do a turn. it's angled to see if he was ever pulled over, good position on these cars. Like, it's these things that none of us would ever think of. And Sean could probably list 100 things that he was looking
I mean,
for.
you got like car haulers. You'd have a car hauler full of cars that were transporting used cars, and you'd look at that car hauler, but I wasn't looking at the car hauler itself. I was looking at the vehicles on the car hauler, and you would see a car on the top in the very front that would have a window down. No, that's not right. When you did get things like paper tags that were on a rental car, because you can always tell your rental cars because they had the barcode, but then they'd have this or that, or you'd see a rental car that had the Jesus fish on there or this or that. A lot of people hid behind that when you had somebody pulled over with a rental car and they had their house keys on it. It tells you, hey, we got something going on here. If you pulled a car over and you could smell Bondo or fresh paint, and you ask them, hey, have you been in a wreck or something? Okay, well, if I'm smelling Bondo and fresh paint, I'm going to start looking for a trap. I'm going to start looking for a hide. So you're looking for all these indicators. When you do get consent to search or your dog indicates, you open up that engine compartment and you ask the person, hey, have you had any engine work done, any oil change or anything? They're like, nope, haven't had anything done, but you can see the fresh fingerprints right there on the air filter.
Now, let me ask you this, Sean, because I know what you're saying and you know what you're saying, because this is the world we live in, and any other cops in here know what we're saying. Every time you would question these people on these indicators, how does their behavior change, and how much more dangerous does the scenario become for you?
Every question you ask, it gets more and more dangerous, because we went through a thing called Desert Snow, which is the premier interdiction school for the United States. And so I went through all the phases of Desert Snow, and it was Border Patrol. That's, who they send a lot of their people through. BP goes to them. And so you're asking questions like, hey, where are you coming from? Where are you going to? And you engage them in conversation, and you find out, oh, well, they're going to see their buddy Jim, who lives 3 counties away, which is just on the border of another state. And then, oh yeah, Jim, where's he live at? And they start telling you where he's at. And, so as you're asking and trying to have a conversation with them, their level is going up. They're getting stressed out, and you start seeing them start doing this, and you start seeing them clenching their fist, and then you bring them back down. So as you're talking to them, you're bringing them up, and then you bring them back down. You bring them up, you bring them down. And then you go to their passenger, and you start talking to the passenger. And what you find is inconsistencies in their stories. No, we weren't going to see Jim. We went to see Helen over in this city here, and then the travel itinerary that one says isn't the same as the other. Dude knows you're over there talking to him and is probably not relaying the same story. You're trying to keep your eye on him. You're trying to keep the eye on this passenger and the passenger in the back. And so that stress level just is constantly going up and down for them, where we're on high alert the entire time. And, it's funny because you've had them up and down so stressed out that by the time you find the dope, the money, the weapons, whatever it is, they're so stressed out. By the time you put them in the back of your truck to take them to jail, they go to sleep, because they've had that adrenaline dump, and now it's gone. And they're mentally and physically fatigued from being through that stress. And a lot of these people, I've pulled over people that were literally on federal parole that should have not been out of the state. And this dude's actually, contemplating, okay, do I drop this dude right here? What do I do? Because I don't want to go back to federal prison, so, and being out there by yourself, knowing your nearest backup's 20 minutes away, if you're lucky, generally everything's over within a minute.
I'm listening to you, Sean, and you're making so many stories flash in my head. It's the nature of the beast, these close calls, and I just want, especially for the vets that are watching the show, Sean's describing like this conversation with these crooks, and you got to understand that, in law enforcement, we're always told, stay out of the fatal funnel, and we always think of an entryway when we see that, like a physical obstacle, but there's a fatal funnel in these conversations where okay, I know there's a gun in this car, or there's a gun on this person. There's 3 people here. Maybe they all got guns, but I know there's at least one gun in this car. if I go forward with the next set of questions, they're going to know that they're going to go to jail, or they're going to know that there's no coming back from these questions. And a lot of cops won't recognize that, and they'll continue on in the conversation, and they enter the fatal funnel of a conversation because they have just set themselves up for a situation where you're not John Wick, bro.
Yeah.
You're not. And a lot of times when I would go and do after, my own personal after action reports of these cops doing exactly what you just described, Sean, I could be like, they didn't see themselves walking themselves into a situation they were not going to be able to control. Yeah. Whereas a good seasoned detective realizes this is going to be an arrest. There's shit here. Yeah. I need to call for backup, and I need to, and like what Sean's saying, that come down part, I need to do a come down that's going to last until my backup gets here. And that may be 10, 15, 20 minutes. I need to find a way to delay it. And then once I got backup, we'll pursue these questions that are coming. Right. And that's what I want you guys to understand, what Sean's explaining in his own story here. That's the difference between surviving an encounter and then us getting headlined, so-and-so, officer so-and-so, end of watch on this date during a traffic stop where he was fatally shot, stuff like this. And we don't get that kind of training anymore, bro. No. Like you're getting these DEI guys that are in there, and these entitled cops that are in there, and you can't stress me out. You can't do this. Yeah. And it makes it bad for everybody, because one, it when you get the criminals that fight these guys, it emboldens them. They get confidence because they're like, oh, these ain't the cops of the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
They don't got a sap in their pocket. They're not pulling out that, that big heavy D-cell thing and being like, oh, there's a light on the other end of this thing. Right. That mentality doesn't exist, right? This is just cop humor, folks. Don't get all stressed out. But I want people to understand what you're saying there. I went the gang route. You went the narc route. Kind of explain. You've covered the interdiction there. Mm-hmm. Got it. What was it like? Did you ever have the chance to be in a stack or to do a raid? Anything like that? And what was that experience like? And if so, do you remember the first time you were going to be in a stack? How you felt?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you got that adrenaline rush. You're putting together your op plan. You're putting together your matrix, your threat assessment. You're doing your intel and your counter surveillance on the place, so you can be as effective as you can, but keeping everybody safe, including the people you're going after. And that was really, it was fun. It was enjoyable. But majority of the ones that I went in on were active meth labs. So, it wouldn't be a bunch of us going in. It would only be 2 or 3 of us going in, and we'd be in Tyvek suits with the SCBA masks and the tank on our back.
Tell everybody why, so they understand why you had to go in like this, and why you can't. When I got to do a stack, we got 7, 8 guys getting ready to go through this door. Explain to them why you couldn't, and the dangers of what you were about to walk into.
So basically, you're walking in, and you've got the exact same thing a fireman's got on. You got on a fireman's pack with an air tank, the SCBA mask, which is covering everything, so you can breathe when you go in. And we've only got 2 or 3 officers going in, because if you're going in on an active meth lab and it ignites or blows up, there's a real issue. People are going to die, and you got lithium, or if it touches water, it's going to ignite to about 1500 degrees instantly until it burns out. You can't just put more water on it. It's just going to continue to burn, and so you'll end up dead. And then you have to have the SCBAs, because the chemicals and the gases that are put off from the meth labs, there's some of the different meth, you had the red pea meth, you had the shake and bake meth, you have all these different ways to make methamphetamine, and it puts off a gas on different ways that they make the meth. And there's some stuff, the gases that are gassed off of the meth labs, that if you take one breath, you will literally be dead before you hit the floor. So that's why you have to have all that extra equipment on, and that's why you didn't take a bunch of people in, because you had to worry about the ignition of the chemicals that were there. And then you also had to worry about making sure you kept everybody where they needed to be, so you could render aid to them in case something happened. So we went in small stacks to be able to do stuff like that. So a lot of meth labs that we went in on, that was always real. You had to watch everything. I mean, you had to make sure you had on the right gear, you had on the right this, you had to make sure there's nothing that you have to worry about with an open flame, no cell phones on you, like, I mean, RF energy can set off some of that stuff. You had to know what chemicals you were dealing with, because once you had your people secure, then you had to secure your meth lab, and you had to secure your chemicals, make sure that none of the chemicals were mixed, because a lot of times they would mix stuff as you were coming in to try to destroy or get stuff to catch on fire and stuff like that. So you had to go in, and you had to go in with purpose. You had to go in hard. You had to go in fast to be able to make sure to keep everybody safe, including the cooks and the people that were there in the meth lab.
And still hope that one of those dudes doesn't decide to shoot you.
Yeah, and that's it too.
Because not only can he put a hole in you, but he can also set off the meth lab.
Exactly. So that was stressful. A lot of the search warrants that we did when I was working narcotics, we would literally dress up like Bell South, have the magnets that went on our vehicle, have a clipboard, have on a hard hat and a shirt, and we'd just go up there and just do a soft entry and knock on the door. Hey, we're with, look like we're with Bell South, and we'd show the people the search warrant and say, you can do this the easy way, you can do it the hard way, you can just let us in, and we're going to come in and be real quiet. Nobody's going to know what's happening. And, so we did a lot of stuff like that too.
Dude, hats off to you, Sean. Because I remember when I would hear about the meth lab stories and stuff, I was like, there's no way. I'm not doing that shit. There's no, you guys.
And, we were trained for meth labs and basically any type of clandestine lab. So that's bomb labs, explosive labs, meth labs, anything that was a clandestine lab is what I was trained in, and we were experts in that. And let me tell you, that was not an easy certification to get through. It was tough. It was tough.
And just to put people, to give them a real example, when I say Sean sees the world a different way, when you're watching, people in this audience, if you're watching your local news and you hear, a single storage unit or 2 storage units explode and catch on fire, or Motel 6 room, explodes and catches on fire. There was a fire call out there. Most people think, oh, crazy. I wonder why the rest didn't blow down. What do you think when you hear headlines like that?
Glad I'm not having to clean it up. I mean, literally, I've seen hotels have or motels have the roof blown off from meth labs. Literally, where the pressure was so much that it lifted the roof off of the building, and it came right back down on the building. But people don't understand that stuff it's serious. It's serious stuff. And here in Tennessee, we had what we called shake and bake labs, where they'd make it in a Mountain Dew bottle or a Gatorade bottle, and here they are with lithium and Coleman Lantern fuel and all this stuff. And they're just sitting over there shaking it, and they got the kids there. I had one meth lab that I did by myself that they were making meth in the kid's bedroom, and I had 4 kids that were there. They were just toddlers, and they're there with the mom, and the mom had been released from the military for popping hot on meth while she was over in the sandbox. And she actually had a full ride scholarship to Duke University, and screwed everything up because she got hooked on it. And I remember, waiting for Department of Children's Services to come, and I've got kids that are, filthy, dirty, and I'm just like, what the hell do I do? So I loaded them up in my truck and took them to McDonald's, and, got them probably the only meal they'd had really to eat in about 2 weeks. Little things like that. It's the things that people don't see.
I do remember the child calls in. I tell people, in just 14 and a half years, only 2 times that I ever had to take kids from a family. And what people don't understand is, like in your situation, you're waiting for CPS. That's the right call to make, hands down, the right call to make. But those kids, regardless of what they're being subjected to, they're scared because we're a stranger. They're scared because they don't know what's going on. Like you said, they're probably dealing with issues of hunger and other things. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, folks, they still love their mom and dad. Yeah. And they're broken that they're being taken from that person. Like it doesn't register because they're so small. They just think that's the way life is.
Yes. Yep.
They don't get to compare it to little Johnny across the street who doesn't get subject. They just think this is the way life is, and this is how this is what love is like, and their heart's being broken because we're taking them from the person they love.
Yep.
That crippled me, bro.
It did. Yeah.
I see that in you too, man. We're down the last couple minutes, so I want to set us up for the next show. Bring us into the kind of the tail end of, you know, how this all came to an end, the law enforcement career, how we ended up linking up, you know, to do our thing, and kind of where you've been thrust into the light right now, and if you can accomplish that in like 6-7 minutes.
Basically, I'd picked up some intelligence that I'd gathered when I was doing interdiction, and I was putting together a net of individuals who were involved in trafficking different things. And I found out that led into public officials being judges, district attorneys, other law enforcement, and things like that. Ended up getting intel on a very large load of narcotics. Contacted local HSI agent, and he was actually already en route because he had gotten the same intel. Took down $1 million load of narcotics there that tied directly into several judges and other people that were tied to the White House, the Clinton White House. We continued gathering intelligence on that through a case that was opened through the U.S. Attorney's Office, and worked that until they basically forced me out of law enforcement. They, you know, wanted me to retire because they went into these DAs. So I retired and opened up my own company, FTG Solutions, F those guys solutions, and started gathering OSINT, open source intelligence, and putting it together. And we were able to really put together a lot of stuff where we identified mortgage fraud. It went into the Democrat Party. It goes into ActBlue. It goes into numerous shell companies. It's literally a transnational operation. Ended up going to work for another agency as the assistant chief. We found out that it tied in the big investigation that we had that was open source intelligence at this point, ended up tying into the corruption there locally and into the district attorneys even further and the judges even further. And so they put together their game plan, and they got their corrupt people within the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to execute search warrants on us and take all of that information from us. And this was after my home was shot up. I went ahead and retired, and so did my chief, because it was just too much stress for the families. We ended up having to move because we were getting death threats. Me and the wife had to move, and the family had to move. And it's to the point that we were able to get with some very, very good people who are bringing us to members of the Department of Justice. And we're meeting with U.S. attorneys. And I've been in contact with some very, very, I don't know how, as a cop from Tennessee in the mountains is talking to the people I'm talking to, but it's happening and things are moving forward. We've had people from like the Gateway Pundit pick up the story and is moving forward with it. As a matter of fact, it's Peter Tickton's investigator, which is President Trump's attorney in Florida, Peter Tickton, and President Trump's longest lifetime friend over 60 years. It's his investigator that did the story on everything. And, we're putting the information out. We've sent it to the DOJ for referral. We've sent it to numerous agencies. We believe at some point in time, it's probably going to be under Title 10, Title 15 at some point, because it does go transnational and it does have to do with national security.
So I just want to understand this real quick, because you went through that last part so fast. So you're telling me a very long-standing attorney for President Trump's, forensic investigator wrote your story of your work out in the Gateway Pundit. That's some very powerful people right there that understand this information. And I hope, people read the story. I'll include that link in the description for those that want to read it. It's absolutely phenomenal information. And people are saying, what are you guys talking about? Well, this is part 2 that you guys are going to have to tune into, folks. This shows people, and I wanted you guys to learn about Sean. So this way, when we get into part 2, which will be Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday on the Alpha Warrior show. So you'll have to bounce back and go over there to watch this one. And that's going to be a show where we dive into exactly what Sean's talking about, and however much Sean's, at liberty to disclose to us, we will cover that so you guys can understand what's coming down, who's involved, what does this look like, what's this timeline look like, the facts and speculation, we'll go into that. But I wanted you guys to realize the man that's doing this work and his story and what he's about. So this way, you don't just have some face on a podcast that's telling you this work. You guys have a taste of who Sean Taylor is. So with that, Sean, I want to get into how I end these shows, which is with some rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Don't think too hard into them. Just, shoot off the cuff. If it's one that doesn't apply, we'll skip past it. So the first one, what's the wildest undercover sting you ever ran that would make its way onto a Netflix series?
I was sent in to buy some Roxy's from a woman who had just gotten out of prison in her 60s, and she was trying to pimp her daughter to me, who had also just gotten out of jail, and trying to get me to. She was trying to pimp her daughter to me, and the code word was fishing. I was supposed to talk about fishing, and the other part of the team was going to come in. So I'm sitting there talking about fishing to the point I'm going fishing, 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 and I could see him running up in the yard, literally laughing, making me sit there and deal with this.
Bro, that's so wrong.
Yeah, it was.
That's so wrong. They were so caught in the moment. And somebody's like, oh shit, that's the code word. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. All right, here's the next one. When you were a narcotics detective, what was the most ridiculous excuse anyone ever gave you about the dope you caught them with?
I had a guy tell me that the dope he had wasn't his because those were not his pants. I had some mushrooms.
Just so
those
you
ain't
know,
my pants.
Just so you know, folks, one of the crazy, and I knew that there was a 70% chance that was going to be the answer. One of the funniest things we hear when you stop them, they're not my pants. Yeah. It's like, what? Why are you wearing someone else's pants, man? What do you mean they're not your pants? And the funny part is when you would ask them, whose pants are they? Describe that person to, and it's crazy because they would usually describe, it's a made up name. You knew it was a made up name, but they would give you a physical description of someone that you're just like, you just described someone that's like 80 pounds heavier than you, and those are supposed to be their pants, not yours. It's hilarious, right? Next one. You were prosecuted for doing the right thing. If you could put one word on a t-shirt that sums up the whole fight, what would it be?
Stronger.
I like that, man. I like that. You kind of answered that one already, so I'll bypass that one. If you ever had a case where the truth was stranger than fiction, what would it be about?
I'm living it.
Yeah,
I'm literally living it.
I can't argue that one, man. All right. In all the years of your surveillance, what's the funniest or most awkward thing that you witnessed, maybe even accidentally witnessed?
Oh, Lord. A brother and sister in a car together doing something they shouldn't have been doing.
Let me add something to that, bro. We had this soccer park in the North End, and it's late, and so you already know what's going to happen. So I happen to be out there before any cars are there because we would also go to those places because they were great for report writing, resting one eye, because we never rest both eyes, you know what I mean? Or just eating, or maybe you wanted to chat on the phone with a buddy. It was our way to, you're so far that if anyone tries to sneak up on you, it's going to be too obvious. So I'm in this area, Sean, and I'm completely blacked out, right? For people that, understand that, it means no lights on, no interior lights on, like you're a shadow in the area. And so this car comes up and it parks, facing the soccer park, and I'm just like, you guys, like, get out of here. Like, I'm trying to relax out here, but their headlights never caught me because kind of the angle of it, so to speak. And so, anyways, I keep eating my. I was having dinner. I was actually having panda, and I'm eating the devil's poisonous Chinese food.
Yep.
And I'm done. And so I'm just like, well, okay, on the way out. And here's the thing: while I'm there eating my Chinese food, you start to see, that vehicles are shaking, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, well, on the way out, I'm going to tell these people, hey, go get a hotel, take this somewhere else. Can't be doing this shit out here. You're going to get robbed and jacked or something like that. Like, you guys have no idea. Like, you're not in a safe area to begin with. And so, as I'm walking up to the car, Sean, your brain is anticipating a normal thing,
Oh,
or at least what's normal for me,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell a guy who's in motion, you do that hard knock that
Yep.
right now, like, hey, and he's just like, man, get her out of here. Don't be doing that here. And then the other person turned around, but it wasn't
Yep.
her.
It was him.
It wasn't him. And then it's just like,
Mm.
get out of here. Like,
Yep.
Get out of here. Go
Yeah.
chill.
Yeah, because you don't even know what to say at that point. You're just like, oh God. Yeah.
And so, and obviously, I'd announced that I was going to be doing a vehicle check, so everybody already knew, I was doing. So, when they hear that pause in the air, your MDC, which is your mobile data computer in the car, you can hear the little thing going ding.
Yep.
Everybody wants to know, what was it? And then when you don't, and you clear the call and you're not telling anybody the information, now it's really going ding, bro. 87 with me. 80, it's just like, it's cops are a weird creature. Here's the last one. What's one skill from your NARC days that people would be surprised translates perfectly into the work you do now?
Is really gathering the information. Information gathering is huge. When you're working narcotics or any type of interdiction, any investigative work, you have to gather the evidence, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and you have to work that evidence to an outcome, whatever that outcome is. And you've got to go where the data leads you. And I was very surprised and with that, and what I mean that's not just reports and information like that. It's also the how people are acting, picking up on body language, picking up on their speech, the specific words that they're using, how